Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to make a face mask. Mine are contoured to fit the face, have a wire in the nose, elastic for ears, and they also have a pocket here for a surgical mask, a filter, or some sort of barrier. I've been making these for the local hospital and nurses in my neighborhood. So here we go. You'll see that I have made patterns, and those are available on my blog, and I have them in 4 different sizes. One is for a large adult, typically a grown man, a small adult or a teenager, and then 2 sizes for kids. One is for ages 7 to 12, and one of them fits 2 to 6. And of course you can extrapolate these for your needs. So the first thing we're gonna do is cut out these patterns. So here we are, all cut out. The directions for these will all remain the same, even though they are all different sizes. The only difference will be the length of the elastic that you will attach at the end, and I'll notate that on the directions for you to see later. Right now, since I am making them for a nurse neighbor, we're gonna stick with the small adult or teenager size. So you can pull that one aside and choose your fabric. All right, so I'm working with 100% cotton, solids, patterns, characters, it doesn't matter. And you'll want to fold your fabric in half, wrong sides together. So this is a great example here. You can see my dinosaurs on top. What I'm gonna do is find the grain, of course, and then take my pattern. Got my little grain line right here, and I'm going to cut 2. As you can see, the fabric is layered twice here. So I'm gonna cut 2 for my fabric. And here we have the fabric. Next thing I'm gonna do is repeat with my lining. All right, so I've got 2 pieces of fabric, 2 pieces of lining. The reason I'm making these different is so that you can see the structure of how I'm putting them together. For the most part, the masks that I have been making have been the same fabric on the front and the back, but today I'm gonna show you guys the different colors. All right, I'm back from the serger. All of my pieces are serged on all the sides, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the 2 fabric pieces, the external if you will, and I'm going to pin them together and sew the long curved side. Basically from nose to chin, I'm going to pin and sew. The same thing goes for the lining. I'm gonna put right sides together and sew from nose to chin only. There's a 3/8 inch seam allowance built in right here, 3/8 of an inch. And as you can see, there's a 3/8 inch seam all the way down that front nose seam. So after you got that done, the next step is to snip that seam just like this. You're gonna wanna take your scissors right up into that edge of that stitching line, and about every 3/4 or an inch or so, snip up to, but not through, that stitching line. What that's gonna give the mask the ability to do is when you invert it and split it, the seam to lie flat. Next up, take a hot iron and lay that seam on the inside down to one side. Take the nose of your iron and nuzzle it into the side. It may take a couple passes to get it nice and flat, but that is our goal, to press it down to one side. So the front of your mask will look like that. Of course, this is the lining, but it won't matter otherwise. You're gonna wanna do that for both parts. Snip down into the seam and then iron. All right, now that I have my exterior and my lining all cut out and ironed and snipped and that sort of stuff, this is where I want you to pay attention. The directions for ironing the sides of the lining and the fabric are just a little bit different. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work with the lining. I want you to fold it over about 5/8 of an inch and then fold it over again. And you'll see that this is the only straight part as it goes into that seam. Then pop it with an iron. You're gonna wanna do the same thing for the other side of that lining. You can set this aside to cool while we work on the exterior shell. Instead of doing 5/8 twice, you're basically going to fold over just a teeny bit, or the equivalent of the serging, and then 5/8. So it's not quite as deep of a fold as the lining. And there will be a method to that madness once everything is nicely ironed and stitched. So if you're wanting a closer look at the difference in those, you want to take a look at the bottom seams. You'll see that the lining one is a little bit shorter, and that's what we want. Next in your directions is you're going to stitch down this portion of each seam, so the inside of each fold, for both the lining and the shell, all 4 of those straight seams. That is your next job. So what I've done is I've snuggled up this inside piece of the fold right on the inside toe of my machine, and then I've left my needle centered. So it's gonna look a little bit like this. Okay, now my stitching is done here. You can see that I have the inside lines all stitched up on the lining and the shell. The next thing I'm going to do is lay right sides together like so. I'm going to pin starting at my center seam. That's the reason I split them like that. So I've got my center seams all lined up, and I'm going to pin it all the way around. Now you'll notice that your lining is a little bit short, and that's good. That's what we want. That's what's gonna create that pocket and give us a place to sew our elastic. So your shell will extend a little bit over your elastic. So start pinning in the middle and then work your way to the outside, trying to make sure this shell piece is as even as possible. Now you're gonna sew again with a 3/8 seam allowance from here, back stitching over the edge, all the way across and back stitch. And here, back stitch, and go all the way across and back stitch. See you guys in a second. All right, here we are with our finished piece. Now I've got a lot of strings. You want to go ahead and clip all those off. If you have not already done so with your serging, do that as well. Next up, we're gonna clip those curves. The same thing we did for this nose to chin seam, we're gonna do here and here. So once again, take those scissors up to, but not through, that stitching line. I'm finding about 3 clips on the bottom ought to do it. And 3 to 4 clips here on the top is fine. Depending on the bulk of your fabric, you may want to clip this off at the top to give that curve a little bit more room, or alternatively, grab yourself a couple of bread ties and lay one up here in the nose seam. Then you can zigzag over this in the seam allowance and create a wired nose. And that will look a lot like this when you're done. You can't see it, but you sure can feel it, and it's moldable to your nose. And so a bread tie will work. If you don't have any bread tie, floral wire works really great. Or I have this wired grapevine that I've been clipping and then pulling some of this papery goodness off of, about that wide, same as a bread tie. Lay it up in there and zigzag over it, and you've got a really nice wired nose. If you don't want to add a nose wire, that's okay. A lot of the surgical masks that will go in here will already have a nose wire. I'm not adding it because of that case. So my nurses already have a surgical mask to go in here. The next thing I'm gonna do is flip it. So I turn the whole thing inside out. And I'm gonna give it a nice press. Okay, once you've got it nicely pressed, you can fold it into the heat a little bit. And we're ready to start attaching our elastic. I'm cutting the elastic for a young child as well as the teenage mask 5 inches. So you'll need 2 pieces of 5-inch elastic. When you're doing the large adult mask, you'll need something more like 6 or 7 inches. Go ahead and fit it to whatever you think fits you best, and then make 2 of those, and then I'll show you how to attach them. Inside our pocket area, you'll pull the lining back a little bit, and you see we have this seam allowance and serging there. You're gonna wanna take about, what is that? I've just been eyeballing it. Maybe 1/3 of an inch of the elastic, and stick it up here underneath that seam allowance. You can either pinch it in place, or you can pin it either one that works for you. I've been making these masks about 5 or 6 at a time. So I have just been pinching and holding, once again, right in there like this. You can pin it if you need to, and if not, that is also okay. And then what you'll do is you will go up and down a whole bunch of times over both of these joints, and then that will solidify this. Repeat on the other side with your other 5-inch piece of elastic. And there you guys have it, a face mask to cover a surgical mask. Offer a filter with a wired nose if you like it or not. And once again, you guys can find the patterns right on the website. Cheers and happy sewing. Thank you so much to the healthcare workers who are on the front lines for us. Thank you. We cannot do it without you.